The blood-red sun hung low on the horizon like a warning sign as Delilah Morgan stepped off the stagecoach onto the dusty main street of Silverton, Colorado. The year was 1876, and the mining town was bustling with fortune seekers, gamblers, and men who smelled of whiskey and desperation. Delilah clutched her worn leather satchel tightly against her chest, her knuckles white with determination. She had not traveled 2,000 miles to turn back now. "First time in Silverton, miss," the stagecoach driver handed down her small trunk. "First and last," Delilah replied, her green eyes scanning the row of wooden buildings. "I'm looking for a man named Lucas Blackwood." The driver's weathered face darkened. "Blackwood, the Silver Baron. His office is at the end of the street, but miss." He hesitated. "He ain't known for his hospitality." Delilah nodded her thanks and began walking. Her high-buttoned boots kicked up dust with each step, the late afternoon sun warming her back through the fabric of her simple navy traveling dress. 3 weeks ago, she had been teaching children their letters in a comfortable Boston schoolhouse. Now she was in the wild heart of the frontier, searching for the man who had broken her sister's heart and left her with nothing but a stack of empty promises and a grave in the Boston cemetery. The mining office of Blackwood Silver stood apart from the other buildings, newer, with actual glass windows and a painted sign. Delilah paused outside, smoothing her travel-wrinkled skirts and touching the locket at her throat for courage. Her sister's face seemed to float before her eyes. "For you, Eleanor," she whispered, then pushed open the door. The interior was unexpectedly fine, with polished wood furnishings and a large desk where a clerk was scratching numbers into a ledger. He looked up, startled to see a woman, a lady, by the looks of her standing in the doorway. "I'm here to see Mr. Blackwood," Delilah said firmly. "Mr. Blackwood is not receiving visitors today," the clerk replied, eyeing her suspiciously. "He'll see me." Delilah stepped forward. "Tell him Eleanor Morgan's sister is here." The clerk's eyebrows rose, but he disappeared through a door behind the desk. When he returned, his face was pale. "Mr. Blackwood will see you now." Lucas Blackwood was younger than Delilah had expected, perhaps 35, with dark hair and the hard eyes of a man who had fought for everything he owned. He stood when she entered, a false smile stretched across his handsome face. "Miss Morgan, what an unexpected pleasure." "I wasn't aware Eleanor had a sister." "There's much you weren't aware of regarding my sister, Mr. Blackwood." Delilah remained standing despite his gesture toward a chair. "Including, it seems, her death 6 weeks ago." The smile vanished. "Eleanor is dead in childbirth, your child." Delilah watched his face carefully, searching for grief, for guilt, for any human emotion. She found none. After a moment, Blackwood cleared his throat. "I'm sorry to hear that, truly, but I fail to see why you've traveled all this way to inform you that you have a daughter," Delilah cut in. "And to request the financial support you promised my sister in your letters." The silence stretched between them. Finally, Blackwood opened a drawer and withdrew a small pouch. "I believe this should suffice," he said, sliding it across the desk. Delilah didn't touch it. "I don't want diamonds or money, Mr. Blackwood. I want justice for my sister," he laughed, the sound hollow. "Justice? This is the West, Miss Morgan. We make our own justice here." His eyes hardened. "Take the payment and return to Boston. Your niece will be well provided for." "My niece needs a father, not provisions." Blackwood's face darkened. "I have a business to run and a reputation to maintain. I cannot acknowledge a child born out of wedlock." "Then perhaps your business partners would be interested in the letters you wrote Eleanor, promising marriage." It was a bluff. The letters had burned in Eleanor's fireplace the night she died, but Delilah kept her chin high. The Silver Baron stood, his voice dangerously low. "You're playing a dangerous game, Miss Morgan. I suggest you leave Silverton tonight. The mountains can be treacherous for those unfamiliar with them." Delilah recognized the threat for what it was. She picked up the pouch, weighing it in her palm. "Is this all a woman's life is worth to you, Mr. Blackwood?" Without waiting for an answer, she dropped the pouch and walked out, the small diamonds scattering across his polished floor like tears. Outside, the sun had nearly set, painting the mountains gold and purple. Delilah stood on the boardwalk, reality crashing over her. She had nowhere to go, little money, and had just made an enemy of the most powerful man in town. "Ain't often someone walks out on Blackwood like that," came a deep voice from her left. Delilah turned to see a tall man leaning against the building's exterior, rolling a cigarette between calloused fingers. His face was partially shadowed by a worn Stetson, but she could see the strong line of his jaw, sun-bronzed and stubbled. "You were eavesdropping, sir?" she asked, drawing herself up despite her exhaustion, hard not to hear raised voices. He struck a match against the building and lit his cigarette, the brief flare illuminating eyes the color of a summer storm. "Logan Reed," he introduced himself with a slight nod. "And based on what I heard, you might be needing some help, Miss Morgan." "I don't require assistance from strangers," Delilah replied, though her traitorous heart leapt at the offer. Logan Reed exhaled a stream of smoke. "No offense, madam, but you just made an enemy of Lucas Blackwood. In Silverton, that means you need friends and quick." A chill that had nothing to do with the mountain air settled over Delilah. "Are you offering to be my friend, Mr. Reed?" His lips quirked up at one corner. "I'm offering you a meal and some advice. There's a decent restaurant at the hotel down the street. After that, you can decide if I'm friend material." Delilah hesitated. Her Boston sensibilities warred with frontier practicality. She knew nothing of this man except that he had the quiet confidence of someone who knew his way around danger. "I should find lodgings first," she said, glancing up the street. "The Silver Crown Hotel has rooms, clean ones too." Logan Reed pushed away from the wall, standing to his full height. He was taller than she'd first thought, broad-shouldered in a worn leather coat. "I'll walk you there." It wasn't proper, accepting a strange man's escort, but nothing about Delilah's situation was proper anymore. She nodded her agreement. As they walked, Delilah was acutely aware of the curious glances from passers-by. A respectable woman alone with a man who was clearly no gentleman, at least not in the Boston sense of the word. "What brings you to Silverton, Mr. Reed?" she asked, breaking the silence. "Work," he answered simply. "I guide mining expeditions into the high country. Locate claims, supply parties, keep folks from getting themselves killed." He glanced down at her. "And you, besides confronting Blackwood," Delilah's throat tightened. "My sister died. Her daughter, my niece, is with a neighbor in Boston until I secure a more permanent arrangement." Logan Reed's expression softened almost imperceptibly. "I'm sorry about your sister." They reached the hotel, a 3-story wooden structure with actual glass windows and a sign advertising hot baths 25 cents. Inside, the lobby was surprisingly clean, with a potted palm that looked out of place in the mountain mining town. The clerk behind the desk eyed Delilah's travel-worn appearance with suspicion until Logan spoke up. "The lady needs a room. Your best available." "We've got one on the second floor, street view," the clerk replied, pushing the registry toward Delilah. As she signed, Delilah realized she had no idea how long she would stay. A day, a week, until she figured out what to do about Blackwood and his obligation to her niece. "I'll wait in the dining room," Logan said, tipping his hat before leaving her to get settled. The room was small but clean, with a narrow bed, washstand, and window overlooking Silverton's Main Street. Delilah quickly washed the travel dust from her face and hands, changed her collar for a fresh one, and repinned her chestnut hair. The face that looked back at her from the spotted mirror was tired but determined. "What am I doing here?" she whispered to her reflection. There was no answer save the distant sound of a piano from the saloon across the street. When Delilah entered the hotel's modest dining room, she spotted Logan Reed immediately. He'd removed his hat, revealing thick dark hair that curled slightly at the collar of his shirt. He stood as she approached, pulling out her chair with unexpected courtesy. "Thank you," she said, settling her skirts. "Though I should warn you, Mr. Reed, that being seen with me might not be wise. I suspect Mr. Blackwood has considerable influence in this town." Logan's mouth quirked into what might have been a smile. "Blackwood and I have an understanding." "What sort of understanding?" "The kind where he leaves me alone, and I don't remind folks about certain incidents from his past." Logan signaled the waiter. "The stew's decent here." Over a simple meal of beef stew and fresh bread, Delilah found herself telling this stranger more than she'd intended about Eleanor's whirlwind romance with Blackwood during his Boston business trip, the letters that followed, and finally the devastating news of her sister's death in childbirth. "Little Catherine is beautiful," Delilah said softly. "She has Eleanor's eyes." "And you came all this way to make Blackwood acknowledge her," Logan concluded. "Yes, he promised Eleanor marriage, promised to send for her. Instead, he abandoned her." Delilah's hands clenched in her lap. "I can't let him escape responsibility so easily." Logan was quiet for a moment, studying her with those storm-gray eyes. "Blackwood's dangerous, Miss Morgan. He didn't build his empire by playing fair. I'm not afraid of him. Maybe you should be." Logan leaned forward. "This ain't Boston. Men like Blackwood make their own rules out here." "Then perhaps it's time someone reminded him of common decency," Delilah replied, lifting her chin. A smile genuine this time crossed Logan's face. "You've got spirit, I'll give you that, but you'll need more than spirit to take on Blackwood." "What would you suggest?" Logan considered her question. "First, you need time. Rushing back to confront him tomorrow won't help. Second, you need leverage, something more than bluffing about letters." "I have nothing else," Delilah admitted. "Not yet," Logan said, "but Blackwood's made enemies." "People talk." He reached for his coffee. "I'm heading into the mountains for a week, guiding a geology party. When I get back, maybe I'll have something useful for you." "A week," Delilah frowned. "I can't wait that long." "You can if you want to succeed," Logan's voice was firm. "Use the time to learn about Silverton, about Blackwood's operation. Knowledge is power, Miss Morgan." Delilah realized he was right. Charging ahead without a plan had already failed once. "Very well, Mr. Reed, a week." "Logan," he corrected. "If we're going to be conspirators, you might as well use my given name." "Delilah," she offered in return, surprising herself. As they finished their meal, Delilah noticed a man watching them from across the room, well-dressed, with the look of someone who carried messages rather than worked with his hands. Logan noticed her gaze. "Blackwood's man," he confirmed quietly. "Word travels fast here." A chill ran down Delilah's spine. "He's having me watched already. Told you he was dangerous." Logan stood, dropping coins on the table. "I'll see you to your room." At her door, Delilah hesitated. "Thank you for your help, Logan." He tipped his hat. "Lock your door, Delilah. I'll check on you before I leave tomorrow." As promised, Logan appeared at her door early the next morning. He handed her a folded piece of paper. "Address of a widow who takes in boarders. Hotels too exposed. Move there today." Delilah took the paper. "Is it safe?" "Safer, Mrs. Holloway's husband was respected here. Even Blackwood won't bother you there directly." He handed her a small revolver. "Know how to use this?" Delilah stared at the weapon. "I'm a schoolteacher, not a gunslinger. Simple enough, point and pull the trigger, but having it is usually enough." When she didn't take it, Logan sighed. "It's a rough country, Delilah. I'll manage without it," she said firmly. Logan tucked the gun away. "Suit yourself. I'll be back in a week. Stay alert." After he left, Delilah gathered her few belongings and settled her hotel bill, ignoring the clerk's curious gaze. Following Logan's directions, she found Mrs. Holloway's boarding house 3 streets back from the main thoroughfare, a neat 2-story home with actual curtains in the windows and marigolds struggling to bloom in boxes beneath them. Mrs. Holloway herself was a surprise younger than Delilah had expected, perhaps 40, with kind eyes and a no-nonsense manner that reminded Delilah of her own mother. "Mr. Reed sent word you'd be coming," she said, showing Delilah to a small but comfortable room. "Any friend of Logan's is welcome here." "You know him well?" Delilah asked, curious about her mysterious ally. Mrs. Holloway's expression softened. "He saved my Thomas during a mine collapse 2 years back, went in when everyone else said it was hopeless." Her eyes grew distant. "Gave me 6 more months with my husband before the consumption took him." "I'm sorry for your loss," Delilah said softly. The widow nodded. "Life's hard out here, but we endure." She straightened. "Breakfast at 7, dinner at 6, laundry days Thursday." Left alone, Delilah unpacked her meager belongings, her mind working through her situation. She needed to learn more about Blackwood, needed leverage if she was to secure Catherine's future. Logan had suggested knowledge was power, and a schoolteacher knew how to research. Over the next days, Delilah established a routine. Mornings were spent carefully exploring Silverton, mapping the town in her mind and observing Blackwood's operations from a distance. The Silver Baron owned not only the largest mine but also the assay office, the freight company, and, she discovered, held the mortgages on half the businesses in town. In the afternoons, she visited the small lending library run by the Presbyterian Church, reading old newspapers and carefully cultivating a friendship with the librarian, Miss Winters, who proved to be a fountain of local gossip. Blackwood came here 5 years ago, Miss Winters told her over tea. Had money already bought the Silver King mine when it was failing. Within a year, it was producing more silver than any operation in the county. He must be quite the businessman, Delilah commented. Miss Winters leaned closer. Some say too good. There was a competing mine, the Blue Diamond. Strange accident there, cave-in killed the owner. Blackwood bought it from the widow for a pittance. By the end of the week, Delilah had compiled a mental dossier on Lucas Blackwood, his businesses, his associates, and the whispers that followed him. What she lacked was proof of any wrongdoing, anything she could use to compel him to acknowledge Catherine. On the 7th day, as Delilah was returning to the boarding house, a man stepped into her path. She recognized Blackwood's clerk from the mining office. "Miss Morgan," he said, removing his hat. "Mr. Blackwood requests the pleasure of your company for dinner this evening." Delilah's pulse quickened. "Does he regrets your previous misunderstanding and wishes to discuss a mutually beneficial arrangement." The clerk held out an envelope. "His carriage will call for you at 7. Taking the envelope, Delilah nodded. "Tell Mr. Blackwood I accept his invitation." Back at the boarding house, she opened the envelope to find a bank draft for a considerable sum. The message was clear. Blackwood was attempting to buy her silence and departure. Mrs. Holloway frowned when Delilah mentioned the dinner invitation. "Blackwood's home is 2 miles outside town, isolated." "I know it's risky," Delilah admitted, "but he's making an offer. I need to hear it." "Logan would tell you not to go." "Logan isn't here," Delilah said, though she wished he was, "and this may be my only chance." At 7 precisely, an elegant black carriage arrived. Delilah had dressed in her best, a dark green dress that brought out her eyes, her mother's cameo pinned at her throat. As the carriage rolled through Silverton and into the foothills beyond, she steeled herself for the confrontation ahead. Blackwood's home was a revelation, a sprawling mansion of stone and timber that would not have looked out of place in Boston's finest neighborhoods. Inside, crystal chandeliers cast warm light over polished hardwood and imported carpets. Lucas Blackwood greeted her in a dining room where a table was set for 2 with fine china and silver. "Miss Morgan," he said, taking her hand, "you look lovely. I'm pleased you accepted my invitation." "Curiosity compelled me," Delilah replied, withdrawing her hand. Over a dinner that featured delicacies Delilah hadn't tasted since leaving Boston, Blackwood was the perfect host, charming, attentive, and utterly false. She recognized the performance from Eleanor's descriptions of their courtship. "I've been considering our situation," Blackwood said as dessert was served. "While I cannot publicly acknowledge the child, I am prepared to be generous." "The child has a name," Delilah said. "Catherine, your daughter." A flicker of something annoyance perhaps crossed his face before his smile returned. "Yes, Catherine, I propose a trust fund administered by a Boston bank. She would want for nothing." "Except a father," Blackwood sighed. "Miss Morgan, be reasonable. I have a position in this community." "A reputation. Surely you understand that some accommodations must be made." "What I understand," Delilah said, setting down her fork, "is that you seduced my sister with promises you never intended to keep, then abandoned her when she needed you most." "That's a rather dramatic interpretation of events," Blackwood replied, his tone hardening. "Your sister knew the nature of our arrangement. Did she? Then why did she keep every letter where you promised to make her your wife?" It was a gamble. The letters were ash, but Delilah watched his face carefully. Uncertainty flickered in his eyes. "Letters can be misinterpreted." Or they can be printed in newspapers, Delilah countered. I wonder what your business associates would think of a man who abandons his own child. The pretense of civility vanished. You're playing a dangerous game, Miss Morgan. These mountains have swallowed people with fewer enemies than you're making. Is that a threat, Mr. Blackwood? He leaned forward. It's a reality. This isn't Boston. There are no authorities to run to, no society to hold men accountable. His voice softened to something almost regretful. Take the money, return to Boston, raise the child as your own. It's the best outcome for everyone. Not for Catherine, who deserves her birthright, Delilah said, rising. And not for my sister, who deserves justice. Blackwood stood as well. Justice is a luxury few can afford out here, Miss Morgan. Then perhaps the cost needs to change, she replied, meeting his gaze steadily. The ride back to town was silent, tension filling the carriage. When they reached Mrs. Holloway's boarding house, Blackwood spoke just as Delilah was about to alight. 3 days, Miss Morgan. Take the offer and leave, or face the consequences. The threat hung in the air as the carriage pulled away. Delilah's hands were shaking as she unlocked the door, but her resolve was stronger than ever. Inside, she was startled to find Logan Reed sitting in Mrs. Holloway's parlor, his expression darkening when he saw her evening attire. You went to Blackwood's, he said, the words flat with disapproval. He invited me to dinner to discuss terms, Delilah explained, suddenly defensive. I needed to hear what he had to say. Logan stood, his tall frame tense with barely controlled anger. You went alone to the home of a man who's already threatened you. Do you have any idea how dangerous that was? I can take care of myself, Delilah insisted. Can you? Logan stepped closer. Blackwood has made people disappear, Delilah, men who crossed him, women who knew too much. Fear fluttered in her chest, but she lifted her chin. Then I'll be careful. Careful isn't enough. Logan ran a hand through his hair in frustration. I told you to wait for me, and I did for a week, but I can't put my life on hold waiting for your return, Logan. Catherine needs me to resolve this. At the mention of her niece, Logan's expression softened slightly. What did Blackwood offer? Money, a trust fund for Catherine administered from Boston. Delilah moved to sit on the sofa, suddenly exhausted, but no acknowledgement, no legitimacy. Logan sat beside her. And you refused. Of course I refused. Catherine deserves her father's name. Even if that father is a man like Blackwood, Logan asked quietly. Delilah hadn't considered that perspective. She deserves the truth, at least, and her rightful inheritance. Logan was silent for a long moment. I found something while I was away, he finally said. The Blue Diamond Mine, there's a man in Durango who worked there before the cave-in. Says it wasn't an accident. Hope sparked in Delilah's chest. Blackwood was responsible. The man's afraid to testify, but he kept documents blasting orders with altered timing. Could prove sabotage. That's it, Delilah breathed. That's our leverage. Logan shook his head. It's dangerous, Delilah. If Blackwood's suspects were gathering evidence against him, he's already threatened me, she cut in. Gave me 3 days to take his money and leave. Alarm flashed across Logan's face. Then we need to move quickly. I can ride to Durango tomorrow, bring back the witness and documents. I'll come with you, Delilah said immediately. No, Logan's voice was firm. It's safer if you stay here. Mrs. Holloway will look after you. I'm not hiding while you risk yourself, Delilah argued, their eyes locked in silent battle until Logan sighed. Stubborn woman, he muttered. Fine, but you follow my lead, understand. This isn't a schoolroom debate. Delilah nodded, relief flooding her. When do we leave? Dawn, Logan said, standing. Pack light, it's a hard ride. The next morning they set out as the first light of dawn painted the mountains gold. Logan had brought a second horse for Delilah, a gentle mare with a smooth gait. Ever ridden before? He asked as he adjusted her stirrups. My father kept horses, Delilah replied, gathering the reins with practiced ease. I'm not completely helpless, you know. A smile tugged at Logan's mouth. Never thought you were a schoolteacher. The trail to Durango wound through spectacular mountain scenery, towering pines, aspen groves shimmering silver green, and meadows bright with late summer wildflowers. Despite the circumstances, Delilah found herself enchanted by the raw beauty of the land. They rode mostly in silence, Logan's eyes constantly scanning the trail ahead and behind. By midday, they had climbed high enough that Delilah could look back and see Silverton nestled in its valley far below. "It's beautiful," she said during a brief rest. "I understand why people come west despite the hardships," Logan nodded, his gaze sweeping the horizon. "Freedom has a way of making up for a lot of discomfort." He looked at her curiously. "You ever think about staying after this business with Blackwood is settled?" The question caught Delilah off guard. I haven't thought that far ahead. My life is in Boston, my teaching position, Catherine." "Teaching positions out here too," Logan said casually. "Towns are growing, families want education for their children." Before Delilah could respond, Logan stiffened, his head turning sharply toward the trail behind them. "We need to move," he said, his voice suddenly hard. "Now." "What is it?" Delilah asked, alarmed by his change in demeanor. "Riders, moving fast." Logan was already helping her mount. "Could be nothing, but I don't take chances in these mountains." They pushed on at a quicker pace, the horses breathing hard as they climbed higher into the mountains. Logan led them off the main trail onto a narrower path that wound through dense forest. "Where are we going?" Delilah called, ducking to avoid low branches. "Old hunting trail," Logan replied over his shoulder. "If someone's following, this might lose them." The trail grew steeper, forcing them to slow despite their urgency. Delilah's thighs ached from hours in the saddle, but she gritted her teeth against the discomfort. If Logan could endure, so could she. As the sun began its descent toward the western peaks, Logan finally called a halt in a small clearing beside a swift-running creek. "We'll camp here," he said, dismounting. "Too dangerous to continue after dark." While Logan tended the horses, Delilah gathered firewood, determined to be useful. By the time he returned, she had a neat pile ready. "Impressive," he commented, setting about starting the fire. "Didn't expect a Boston schoolteacher to know about proper kindling." "My father believed in practical education," Delilah replied, arranging her skirts as she sat on a fallen log. "We spent summers at a cabin in the White Mountains." As night fell, they shared a simple meal of jerky, hard biscuits, and coffee. The fire cast dancing shadows across Logan's face, highlighting the strong line of his jaw and the watchful intensity of his eyes. "Why are you helping me, Logan?" Delilah asked suddenly. "You hardly know me." He was quiet for so long that she thought he might not answer. Finally, he said, "I know what it's like to lose family, to need justice." His eyes met hers across the fire. "And I know what Blackwood is, what he does to people who stand in his way. You've confronted him before." Logan's expression hardened. "The blue diamond wasn't his only acquisition. My brother had a claim north of Silverton, good silver vein. Blackwood wanted it." He stared into the flames. "Jacob refused to sell. 2 weeks later, they found him at the bottom of a ravine. Accident, they called it." Delilah's heart contracted. "I'm so sorry, Logan." "Couldn't prove anything," he continued, his voice tight. "But I knew, everyone knew, just no one willing to stand against him." He looked up at her. "Until you." The weight of his gaze made something shift inside Delilah, a recognition of shared purpose, of understanding too deep for their brief acquaintance. "We should get some sleep," Logan said, breaking the moment. "I'll take first watch. You don't think we're safe here?" "Never assume you're safe in Blackwood's territory." He handed her his bedroll. "Get some rest, I'll wake you in a few hours." Delilah settled into the bedroll, the unfamiliar sounds of the wilderness surrounding her, the creek's gentle murmur, the wind in the pines, the occasional hoot of an owl. Despite her exhaustion, sleep eluded her as she watched Logan's silhouette against the starlit sky. This man, this virtual stranger, was risking his life to help her find justice. Not just for her, she realized, but for his brother too. For all those Blackwood had wronged. The thought warmed her more than the dying fire. She must have eventually drifted off, because the next thing she knew, Logan was gently shaking her shoulder. "Delilah," he whispered, "need you to wake up." The urgency in his voice brought her instantly alert. "What is it, riders?" "Coming up the trail." He was already saddling the horses. "We need to move." The sky was just beginning to lighten with pre-dawn gray as they mounted. Logan led them deeper into the forest, away from the trail, the horses picking their way carefully through the undergrowth. "Who would be tracking us?" Delilah whispered as they paused to listen. "Blackwood's men," Logan replied grimly. "He must have had you followed when you returned from his house." Fear prickled along Delilah's spine, but she pushed it aside. "How far to Durango?" "At this pace, we won't make it until tomorrow." Logan scanned the forest. "There's a line shack about 5 miles from here. Old friend of mine uses it during hunting season. We might be able to hole up there, wait them out." They rode in tense silence, every snapping twig making Delilah jump. The forest grew denser, the terrain more rugged. Several times, Logan had to help her navigate particularly difficult stretches, his strong hands steady and reassuring. By mid-morning, they reached a small, rough-hewn cabin nestled against a granite outcropping. It was little more than a single room with a stone fireplace, but to Delilah it looked like a fortress. "Will your friend mind us using his cabin?" she asked as Logan unlocked the door. "Sam's been dead 3 years," Logan replied, his expression unreadable. "Hunting accident." At least, that's what Blackwood's men called it. Inside, the cabin was dusty but intact, a narrow bed against one wall, a table and 2 chairs, shelves stocked with basic provisions. Logan quickly checked the supplies while Delilah brushed the dust from the single window, peering out at the forest beyond. "We should be safe here for a while," Logan said, placing his rifle by the door. "Cabin's hard to find if you don't know it's here, and if they do find us." Delilah asked, voicing the fear that had been growing since they fled their campsite. Logan's eyes met hers. "Then I'll handle it." "I won't let you face danger alone," Delilah said firmly. "This is my fight too." A look of surprise, followed by something warmer, crossed Logan's face. "You're not like any schoolteacher I've ever met, Delilah Morgan." "Perhaps you haven't met enough schoolteachers," she replied with a small smile. They spent the day in the cabin, speaking in low voices about their plan. If they could reach the witness in Durango and secure his testimony, they might have enough leverage to force Blackwood to acknowledge Catherine. If not, Logan suggested they could take the evidence to the territorial governor in Denver. As darkness fell, Logan built a small fire in the fireplace, careful to keep it low so the smoke wouldn't be visible from a distance. The dancing flames cast a warm glow over the cabin's interior, making it feel almost cozy despite the circumstances. They shared a simple meal from the cabin store's beans, dried apples, and coffee. Sitting across the rough table from Logan, Delilah found herself studying his face, the lines around his eyes that spoke of long days in the sun, the small scar that cut through his right eyebrow, the way his mouth softened when he smiled. "Tell me about Boston," Logan said suddenly. "About your life there." Delilah described her small apartment near the school where she taught, her walks along the Charles River, the bookshop where she spent Sunday afternoons browsing new arrivals. "Sounds peaceful," Logan commented. "Different from here." "It was. Orderly," Delilah admitted. "Perhaps too orderly. After Eleanor died, I realized how confined my life had become, how predictable." "And now you're on the run in the mountains with a wanted man," Logan said with a wry smile. "Are you wanted?" Delilah asked, surprised. "Not officially," he shrugged. "But I've made it clear to Blackwood that I know what happened to Jacob. He'd prefer me gone." "Yet you've stayed in Silverton." Logan's eyes darkened. "Some things are worth the risk." The air between them seemed to thicken with unspoken words. Delilah found herself acutely aware of his presence across the small table, the breadth of his shoulders, the strength in his hands as they cradled his coffee cup. "We should get some rest," Logan said, breaking the spell. "Long ride tomorrow." There was only one bed. Logan immediately took his bedroll to the floor near the door. "I'll sleep here," he said, brooking no argument. "Need to listen for company anyway." Delilah wanted to protest but knew it would be futile. Instead, she settled onto the narrow bed, pulling the rough blanket around her shoulders. "Good night, Logan," she whispered. His reply came softly from the darkness. "Sleep well, Delilah." She lay awake for a long time, listening to the night sounds of the forest and Logan's steady breathing. Her life had changed so dramatically in such a short time. A month ago, she had been grading spelling tests in her Boston classroom. Now she was hiding in a mountain cabin with a man she barely knew but somehow trusted with her life, more than trusted, perhaps. The thought sent a flutter through her chest that had nothing to do with fear. Dawn broke clear and cold, sunlight streaming through the cabin's single window. Delilah woke to find Logan already up, checking his rifle by the door. "Any sign of trouble?" she asked, smoothing her wrinkled dress as best she could. "Not yet." Logan's expression was grim. "But that doesn't mean they're not out there." They ate a hasty breakfast, packed their few belongings, and prepared to leave. Logan insisted on scouting ahead first, leaving Delilah alone in the cabin with instructions to bar the door behind him. The minutes of his absence stretched endlessly. Delilah paced the small room, straining to hear any sound from outside. When a sharp knock finally came, she nearly jumped out of her skin. "It's me," Logan called softly. Delilah unbarred the door, relief washing over her at the sight of him. "Well, trail looks clear, but we need to be careful." He handed her the reins to her horse. "Stay close. If anything happens, if I tell you to run, you ride for Durango and don't look back." "I won't leave you," Delilah said firmly. Logan's expression hardened. "This isn't negotiable, Delilah. Catherine needs you alive more than she needs Blackwood's name." The mention of her niece struck home. Delilah nodded reluctantly. "Very well." They set out, following a faint trail that wound through the forest and eventually rejoined the main path to Durango. The day warmed as they rode, but Delilah couldn't shake the chill of apprehension. Every snapping twig, every bird taking flight made her tense. They had been riding for perhaps 2 hours when Logan suddenly raised his hand, signaling a halt. He cocked his head, listening intently, then guided his horse off the trail into a dense stand of pines. "What?" Delilah began, but Logan silenced her with a look. They waited, barely breathing, as the sound of approaching horses grew louder. Through gaps in the trees, Delilah could make out 3 riders moving slowly along the trail they had just left. "Blackwood's men," Logan mouthed silently. The riders paused where they had left the trail, one dismounting to examine the ground. Delilah's heart pounded so loudly she was certain they would hear it. After what seemed an eternity, the men remounted and continued down the trail. Logan waited until the sound of hooves had faded completely before speaking. "They're heading toward Durango," he said grimly. "Looking to cut us off before we reach the witness." "What do we do?" Delilah asked, fear making her voice tight. Logan considered for a moment. "Change of plans. There's another route, longer, rougher, but they won't expect it." The longer, rougher route proved to be a severe understatement. They climbed higher into the mountains, following game trails that sometimes disappeared altogether, forcing them to dismount and lead the horses over treacherous terrain. By late afternoon, Delilah was exhausted, her muscles screaming in protest. But she refused to complain, matching Logan's determined pace as best she could. They were traversing a narrow ledge, a sheer drop to their right, when Logan's horse suddenly shied, nearly sending him over the edge. He regained control just in time, soothing the frightened animal. "What happened?" Delilah asked, heart in her throat. Logan dismounted carefully, examining the ground. "Someone's been here," he said, pointing to fresh boot prints in the dirt. "Recently?" Fear clutched at Delilah's chest. "Blackwood's men, maybe," Logan's expression was grim, "or prospectors, hunters." "Hard to say." They proceeded with even greater caution, Logan now leading both horses while Delilah walked behind, every sense alert for danger. The sun was setting by the time they reached a small plateau where a stream cut through the rocky ground. "We'll camp here," Logan decided. Pushing on in the dark would be too dangerous. They made a cold camp, unwilling to risk a fire that might be spotted from a distance. As night fell, the temperature dropped sharply, and Delilah found herself shivering despite her woolen cloak. "Here," Logan said, draping his coat around her shoulders. "Can't have Boston's finest schoolteacher freezing to death on my watch." "What about you?" Delilah protested, though she clutched the warm leather gratefully. "I'm used to mountain nights." He settled beside her, close enough that she could feel his warmth but not quite touching. "We should reach Durango by tomorrow afternoon if we start at first light, And if Blackwood's men are waiting for us, Logan's face hardened in the dim starlight, then we deal with them. They sat in silence for a long moment, the vastness of the night sky spreading above them, brilliant with stars. Despite the danger, despite the uncertainty ahead, Delilah felt a strange peace in this wild place with this man beside her. "I never thanked you properly," she said softly. "For helping me, for risking your life." Logan turned to look at her, his eyes silver in the starlight. "You don't need to thank me, Delilah. Some things are worth fighting for. Justice for your brother," she asked, "that and other things." His gaze held hers, and something unspoken passed between them, a recognition, an acknowledgement of feelings neither was ready to name. A sudden rustle in the brush beyond their camp broke the moment. Logan was on his feet instantly, rifle in hand, positioning himself between Delilah and the potential threat. Tense seconds passed before a deer emerged from the trees, regarded them with liquid eyes, then bounded away. Logan lowered his rifle, but the intimacy of the moment had passed. "Try to get some sleep," he said, his voice carefully neutral. "I'll take first watch." Delilah wrapped herself in his coat and her blanket, inhaling the scent of leather and pine that she had come to associate with Logan. As exhaustion pulled her towards sleep, her last conscious thought was that she was falling in love with a man as wild and unpredictable as the mountains themselves. Morning came with a misty rain that soaked through clothing and chilled to the bone. They ate a hasty breakfast of jerky and the last of their hardtack, then mounted up for the final leg of their journey. The trail to Durango grew more defined as they descended from the high country, eventually widening into a proper road. By mid-afternoon, they could see the town sprawled along the Animas River below. "We made it," Delilah said, relief making her voice tremble. "Not quite yet," Logan cautioned. Blackwood's men could still be waiting. They approached cautiously, taking a circuitous route that brought them into town from the north rather than the main road. Durango was larger than Silverton, with more substantial buildings and a busier main street, evidence of its status as a growing railroad hub. Logan led them to a modest boarding house on a side street, well away from the main thoroughfares. "Wait here," he said, helping Delilah dismount. "I'll check if our witness is still in town." Delilah waited anxiously in the small room Logan secured for her, pacing until her legs ached. When he finally returned hours later, his expression told her everything. "He's gone," she said, not a question. Logan nodded grimly. "Left yesterday on the eastbound train. Landlady said 2 men came looking for him the day before. Blackwood's men." Delilah sank onto the bed, despair washing over her. "We're too late." "Not necessarily." Logan sat beside her. "Landlady said he left in a hurry, but mentioned something about leaving papers with the assayer man named Henderson. They were friends, apparently." Hope flickered within Delilah. "Then the evidence might still exist. We'll find out tomorrow." Logan stood. "For now, you should rest. You're safe here." "Where are you going?" Delilah asked, suddenly reluctant to let him out of her sight. "To check the town, see if Blackwood's men are still around." His expression softened at her worried look. "I'll be careful, and I'll be back soon." After he left, Delilah washed away the grime of their journey in the basin provided, then changed into her spare clothing, a simple blue dress now hopelessly wrinkled. She combed her hair, trying to restore some order to the chestnut waves that had escaped their pins during the hard ride. Looking in the spotted mirror, she hardly recognized herself. The woman who stared back had sun-flushed cheeks and determined eyes that held none of the sheltered innocence of the Boston schoolteacher who had arrived in Silverton just weeks ago. Logan returned as twilight was fading into true darkness. "Town seems quiet," he reported. "No sign of Blackwood's men, but that doesn't mean they're not here." They shared a simple meal brought up from the boarding house kitchen, sitting close at the small table in Delilah's room. The proximity, the shared danger, the days of travel together had created an intimacy between them that went beyond mere friendship. "What will you do after this is resolved?" Logan asked suddenly. "Return to Boston with Catherine." Delilah considered the question. "That was my plan," she admitted. But now, she looked up at him. I'm not sure Boston is where I belong anymore. Something flickered in Logan's eyes, hope, perhaps. The West changes people, he said softly, makes them see what they really want. And what do you want, Logan? Delilah asked, her heart suddenly pounding. He held her gaze for a long moment. Things I didn't think I could have, he said finally. A future, a home, he hesitated. Someone to share it with. The air between them seemed charged with possibility, with words unspoken but understood. Slowly, as if giving her time to pull away, Logan reached out and took her hand. His palm was rough with calluses, warm against her skin. Delilah turned her hand to intertwine her fingers with his, a silent acknowledgement of whatever was growing between them. We should try to see Henderson first thing tomorrow, Logan said, his voice rougher than usual. The sooner we get what we need, the sooner we can deal with Blackwood. Delilah nodded, though neither made any move to break the contact between them, and if we get the evidence. Then we go back to Silverton, Logan said, and you get justice for your sister and niece. They sat in companionable silence, hands still joined until the lamp began to sputter, oil running low. Only then did Logan reluctantly stand. I'll be next door if you need anything, he said, his eyes holding hers. Good night, Delilah. Good night, Logan, she replied softly. After he left, Delilah lay awake for a long time, her hand still warm from his touch, her heart full of emotions she hadn't expected to find in this wild country so far from home. The next morning dawned clear and bright, the streets of Durango already busy with morning traffic when Logan knocked on Delilah's door. Together, they made their way to the assayer's office on the main street, a substantial brick building with Henderson Assay and Mining Exchange painted on the window. Inside, they found a middle-aged man with spectacles perched on his nose, examining a rock sample with a magnifying glass. He looked up as they entered, his expression guarded. Mr. Henderson? Logan asked. My name's Logan Reed. This is Miss Morgan. We're looking for some papers that Martin Collins might have left with you. At the mention of Collins, Henderson's face closed completely. Don't know any Collins, he said flatly. You must be mistaken. Please, Delilah stepped forward. It's important. Lives depend on it. Henderson's eyes flicked to the door, then back. I told the other men the same thing yesterday. Don't know any Collins, don't have any papers. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have work to do. Blackwood's men had been there. Delilah and Logan exchanged a look of dismay. Mr. Henderson, Delilah tried again. We're not working for Blackwood, quite the opposite. We're trying to gather evidence against him. Don't care who you work for, Henderson replied, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of interest. Don't know what you're talking about. Logan moved closer to the counter, lowering his voice. My brother was Jacob Reed. Blackwood took his claim 3 years ago. Jacob died in an accident a week later. Henderson's eyes widened slightly in recognition. The Silver Peak claim, he murmured. I remember. Then you know what Blackwood is, Logan pressed, what he does to people who stand in his way. Henderson hesitated, then glanced toward the back of his shop. Not here, he said quietly. Meet me at the church in an hour, side door. They left the assay office with renewed hope, spending the hour walking Durango's streets with careful vigilance, alert for any sign of Blackwood's men. The town was busy miners, railroad workers, and settlers mingling on the wooden sidewalks. You think Henderson will help us? Delilah asked as they approached the small clapboard church at the appointed time. He seemed to recognize Jacob's name, Logan replied. That's something. The side door of the church was unlocked as promised. Inside, they found themselves in a small vestry, Henderson already waiting, nervously pacing the worn floorboards. I shouldn't be doing this, he said by way of greeting. Blackwood has a long reach. So does justice, eventually, Delilah replied. Henderson snorted. Justice is in short supply out here, madam. Nevertheless, he reached into his waistcoat and withdrew a sealed envelope. Collins left this with me before he disappeared. Said if anything happened to him, I should make sure it reached the right hands. Logan took the envelope. What's in it? Don't know, don't want to know. Henderson moved toward the door, but Collins was chief engineer at the Blue Diamond before the cave-in. He knew things. He paused, hand on the doorknob. Be careful. Those men who came yesterday, they weren't just hired muscle. One of them was Blackwood's right-hand man, Taylor. After Henderson left, Logan carefully opened the envelope. Inside were several documents blasting orders with alterations, a map of the Blue Diamond with questionable support structures circled, and a letter from Collins detailing his suspicions about the cave in that had killed the mine's owner. "This is it," Delilah breathed. "Proof that Blackwood deliberately caused the cave-in. Enough to threaten him with at least," Logan agreed, studying the documents. "Might not stand up in court, but the territorial governor would take it seriously. Mining safety is a hot issue right now." They carefully resealed the documents and left the church, the precious evidence secured inside Logan's coat. Their plan was simple: return to Silverton immediately, confront Blackwood with the evidence, and force him to acknowledge Catherine in exchange for their silence. As they turned onto the main street, heading back to the boarding house to collect their things, Delilah suddenly grabbed Logan's arm. "Logan," she whispered urgently, "by the bank." Two men stood on the boardwalk outside the Durango Bank and Trust, scanning the street with the watchful eyes of predators. One was tall and lean, with a shock of white blonde hair visible beneath his hat. The other was built like a bull, with massive shoulders straining his coat. "Taylor and Burke," Logan confirmed grimly. "Blackwood's men. They ducked into the nearest shop, a millinery store, before they could be spotted. Through the window, they watched as the men continued their survey of the street. They must be looking for us," Delilah said, her heart racing. "Or for Henderson. We need to get out of town," Logan decided. "Now, before they spot us." They slipped out the back of the shop and made their way through alleyways to the boarding house, where they quickly gathered their belongings and retrieved their horses from the livery. "We'll take the southern route," Logan said as they mounted up. "Longer, but less likely they'll look for us that way." They rode out of Durango as casually as possible, fighting the urge to gallop until they were well beyond the town limits. Once clear of the last buildings, Logan led them south along the Animas River before cutting west into the mountains. The terrain was rugged but beautiful, the late summer sun bathing the slopes in golden light. Under different circumstances, Delilah might have found it breathtaking. Now she could only focus on the trail ahead and the constant fear of pursuit. They pushed hard until dusk, making camp in a sheltered ravine where a small stream provided fresh water. Logan insisted on a cold camp again, unwilling to risk a fire that might give away their position. As they sat side by side, sharing the last of their provisions, Delilah felt a curious mixture of fear and exhilaration. They had the evidence now, a real chance to bring Blackwood to justice and secure Catherine's future. "What will happen when we confront Blackwood?" she asked, voicing the concern that had been growing since they left Durango. Logan was silent for a moment. "Best case, he recognizes he's cornered and agrees to your terms, acknowledges Catherine provides for her future. And worst case," his eyes met hers in the gathering darkness, "he decides eliminating us is simpler than negotiating." The blunt assessment sent a chill through Delilah. "He wouldn't dare, not openly." "Wouldn't be the first accident in these mountains," Logan said grimly, "but having the documents gives us some protection. If we make it known that copies exist, to be sent to authorities in case anything happens to us." "We should prepare such copies as soon as we reach Silverton," Delilah agreed. They fell silent, the weight of their situation settling between them. After a while, Logan reached over and took her hand, his thumb tracing small circles on her palm. "Whatever happens," he said softly, "I want you to know I don't regret any of this, meeting you, helping you." Delilah turned to face him, her heart pounding. "Nor do I," she whispered. In the silver moonlight, his eyes searched hers, finding whatever answer he sought. Slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, Logan leaned forward until his lips met hers in a kiss so gentle it made her heart ache. Delilah's free hand came up to rest against his chest, feeling the strong, steady beat of his heart beneath her palm. The kiss deepened, becoming a promise, an acknowledgement of feelings that had been growing since that first meeting outside Blackwood's office. When they finally parted, Logan rested his forehead against hers. I've known you less than 2 weeks, he murmured. Feels like I've been waiting for you my whole life. I know, Delilah replied simply because she did know. Whatever this was between them, this connection that defied reason and time, it was real and powerful, and unlike anything she had ever experienced. They sat together under the vast canopy of stars, hands intertwined, the danger ahead temporarily overshadowed by the discovery of something precious and unexpected. Morning brought renewed determination. They broke camp early and rode hard, pushing through mountain passes and across high meadows still jeweled with dew. By mid-afternoon, they could see Silverton in the distance, nestled in its valley. We'll go to Mrs. Holloway's first, Logan decided as they began their descent. Get cleaned up, make copies of the documents, then plan our next move. The boarding house was a welcome sight after days on the trail. Mrs. Holloway greeted them with concern in her kind eyes. Been worried sick about you too, she scolded, ushering them inside. Especially with Blackwood's men asking questions all over town. They've been looking for us here, Logan asked sharply. Ever since you left, Mrs. Holloway confirmed. That Taylor fellow came by twice. I told him you'd gone east to Denver. She smiled grimly. Figured that would send them on a wild goose chase. Delilah hugged the older woman impulsively. Thank you, Mrs. Holloway. You can thank me by being careful, she replied. Blackwood's been in a rare temper since you disappeared, Miss Morgan. Whatever you're planning, watch yourselves. In the privacy of Delilah's room, they spread out Colin's documents on the small table. Logan had procured paper and ink from Mrs. Holloway, and they set about making careful copies. We'll leave one set with Mrs. Holloway, Logan said, another with the Presbyterian minister. Both sealed with instructions to send them to the territorial governor if anything happens to us. And then we confront Blackwood, Delilah said, determination hardening her voice. Logan studied her face. You're sure about this? We could still take the evidence straight to the authorities in Denver. And let Blackwood slip away? No, Delilah shook her head. He needs to acknowledge Catherine. She deserves her birthright. As darkness fell, they finalized their plan. They would approach Blackwood the next morning at his office in town rather than at his isolated home. Public settings were safer, with potential witnesses. Mrs. Holloway insisted on feeding them a proper meal: roast chicken, potatoes, and fresh bread that tasted like heaven after days of jerky and hardtack. Afterward, they sat in her small parlor, the normality of the setting at odds with the danger they would face tomorrow, when Mrs. Holloway retired for the evening. Logan and Delilah remained by the fire, reluctant to part despite their need for rest. Their hands found each other naturally now, fingers intertwining without conscious thought. When this is over, Logan said quietly. What then? Delilah looked up at him. I need to return to Boston, at least briefly, for Catherine and after. His eyes held hers, vulnerability plain in their depths. After depends on many things, she said honestly. On whether we succeed tomorrow, on Catherine's needs. She paused. On what you want. Logan's hand tightened around hers. What I want is simple, Delilah. A future with you, whether that's here or in Boston or anywhere else. The words she had hoped to hear, yet they brought both joy and uncertainty. Logan, we've known each other such a short time, some things you just know, he interrupted gently. I've spent my life in these mountains, learning to trust my instincts. They've never been clearer than they are about you. Delilah's heart swelled. I feel the same, she admitted. But Catherine must come first now. She's lost so much already. I understand, Logan said, and I'd never ask you to choose. Catherine would be part of our life, not separate from it. The idea of a life together, Logan, herself, Catherine filled Delilah with a hope so intense it was almost painful. Let's get through tomorrow first, she said softly. Then we can talk about futures. Morning arrived clear and crisp, the early September air carrying the first hint of autumn. Delilah dressed with care in her best remaining dress, a deep blue that brought out the green of her eyes. If she was to confront Blackwood, she would do so looking every inch the Boston lady she had once been. Logan was waiting in the parlor, clean-shaven and wearing a fresh shirt beneath his usual worn leather coat. The The documents were secured inside his coat, with copies safely delivered to their designated custodians. "Ready?" he asked as she descended the stairs. Delilah nodded, drawing strength from his steady presence. "Ready." They walked together toward Blackwood's office, the morning sun warming their backs. Silverton was already bustling, miners heading to their shifts, shopkeepers opening their establishments for the day's business. Blackwood Silver's office looked exactly as it had the day Delilah first arrived in town, though it felt like a lifetime had passed since then. The same clerk looked up as they entered, his eyes widening in recognition. "Miss Morgan," he stammered, "and Mr. Reed, Mr. Blackwood isn't receiving visitors today. He'll see us," Logan said, his voice brooking no argument. "Tell him we have information about the Blue Diamond mine that might interest him." The mention of the Blue Diamond sent the clerk scurrying to the back office. He returned moments later, his face pale. "Mr. Blackwood will see you now." Lucas Blackwood stood behind his desk as they entered, his handsome face arranged in a mask of polite inquiry that didn't reach his cold eyes. "Miss Morgan, Mr. Reed," he greeted them. "I understood you had left town rather suddenly." "We had business in Durango," Delilah replied calmly. "Indeed." Blackwood's gaze hardened. "Curious business that had my men searching for you there." "Your men have been busy," Logan commented. "In Durango, in Silverton." "Seems you're anxious to find us." Blackwood's smile was thin. "Merely concerned for Miss Morgan's safety. The mountains can be dangerous for those unfamiliar with them." "How thoughtful," Delilah said, her voice ice. "But as you can see, I'm perfectly safe with Mr. Reed." Blackwood's gaze flicked between them, calculating. "I see, and what brings you back to my office? I believe we concluded our business during our dinner." "Not quite," Delilah said. "We've come with new terms." "Terms?" Blackwood's eyebrow rose. "I wasn't aware we were negotiating." Logan stepped forward, placing Colin's envelope on the desk. "We think you'll want to reconsider Miss Morgan's requests once you've reviewed these documents." Blackwood made no move to touch the envelope. "And what might these be?" "Evidence," Delilah said simply. "From Martin Collins, chief engineer at the Blue Diamond mine before the unfortunate cave-in that killed its owner." The color drained from Blackwood's face, though his expression remained controlled. "Collins is a disgruntled former employee with a vendetta against me." "Perhaps," Logan agreed. But his documentation of the altered blasting orders, the compromised support structures, it makes for compelling reading. The territorial governor would certainly find it interesting. Blackwood's jaw tightened. "You're attempting to blackmail me, Mr. Reed." "We're attempting to negotiate," Delilah corrected. "My terms are simple. Acknowledge Catherine as your daughter, provide legally for her future, and this evidence never sees the light of day." For a long moment, Blackwood was silent, his mind visibly working through the implications. Finally, he smiled, a cold, calculating expression that sent a chill down Delilah's spine. "You seem to think you have the upper hand," he said softly. "But consider your position carefully. Even if these documents contain what you claim, it would be your word against mine. A respected businessman versus a schoolteacher from Boston and a mountain guide with a personal grudge." "We've taken precautions," Logan said. "Copies of these documents are in safe hands, with instructions to forward them to Denver if anything happens to us." Something dangerous flashed in Blackwood's eyes. A clever safeguard, but perhaps unnecessary. He leaned back, steepling his fingers. "I'm a reasonable man, Miss Morgan. I've always been willing to provide for the child financially." "She needs more than money," Delilah insisted. "She needs your name, her rightful inheritance." "And what of my reputation, my standing in this community, your reputation?" Delilah's voice rose slightly. "You seduced my sister with false promises, abandoned her when she needed you most, and now you speak of reputation." Blackwood's expression hardened. "Careful, Miss Morgan. Even with your insurance policy, there are lines best not crossed." Logan moved subtly closer to Delilah, his presence protective. "The terms are fair, Blackwood. Acknowledge Catherine legally as your heir, provide for her future, and these documents disappear." A tense silence filled the office as Blackwood considered their proposal. Delilah held her breath, aware that everything Catherine's future, her own, and whatever might be growing between her and Logan hung on Blackwood's decision. Finally, he sighed, a sound of calculation rather than defeat. Very well. I will acknowledge the child as mine and make provisions for her inheritance. His cold eyes fixed on Delilah. But I will not have her brought here. She remains in Boston, raised by you or whoever you designate. Relief flooded Delilah, though she kept her expression neutral. Agreed. And I want it in writing, legally binding. My lawyer will draw up the necessary documents, Blackwood said. I assume you'll want to review them before returning to Boston. We will, Logan confirmed. And the originals of these, he tapped the envelope, will remain secure until the agreement is finalized and executed. Blackwood's smile didn't reach his eyes. Of course, I wouldn't expect anything less. He stood, signaling the end of the meeting. My clerk will contact you when the documents are ready for review. Outside, in the clear mountain air, Delilah let out a shaky breath. Do you think he'll honor the agreement, with the leverage we have? Yes, Logan's expression was grim, but he won't forgive being cornered. We'll need to be careful until everything is signed and you're safely on your way back to Boston. The word Boston hung between them, a reminder of the decisions still to be made, the future still uncertain despite their victory. Come on, Logan said, offering his arm. Let's get back to Mrs. Holloway's. It's not over yet. The next 3 days passed in a strange limbo of caution and anticipation. They remained mostly at the boarding house, venturing out only when necessary and always together. Blackwood's men were visible in town, but made no move to approach them, a fact that Logan found more concerning than reassuring. He's planning something, he said on the evening of the third day, pacing Mrs. Holloway's small parlor. Blackwood doesn't surrender this easily. The documents give us protection, Delilah reminded him, though she shared his unease. Only if he believes we'll use them. Logan stopped pacing, his expression troubled. Just promise me you won't meet with him or his lawyer alone, not for any reason. I promise, Delilah said softly, reaching for his hand. On the morning of the fourth day, Blackwood's clerk appeared at the boarding house with a message. The legal documents were ready for their review at the office of Judge Wilson, Silverton's most respected legal mind. This is good, Logan said as they prepared to leave. Wilson's honest. Blackwood can't manipulate him easily. The judge's office was located above the bank, a fitting symbol of his status in the community. Judge Wilson himself was a surprise younger than Delilah had expected, perhaps 40, with intelligent eyes behind wire-rimmed spectacles. Miss Morgan, Mr. Reed, he greeted them, gesturing to the chairs before his desk. Mr. Blackwood has explained the situation to me. I've drawn up the documents according to the terms you agreed upon. He slid a thick sheaf of papers across the desk. Take your time reviewing them. I want to ensure all parties are satisfied before anything is signed. The legal language was dense, but the substance was clear. Lucas Blackwood acknowledged Catherine Eleanor Morgan as his natural daughter and legal heir. A substantial trust was established in her name, with Delilah as trustee until Catherine reached adulthood. The terms were more generous than Delilah had dared hope. These appear to be in order, she said finally, looking to Logan for confirmation. He nodded, having read over her shoulder. When will Mr. Blackwood sign? He already has, Judge Wilson replied, turning to the last page where Blackwood's bold signature was clearly visible. He asked me to witness your signatures as well, Miss Morgan, to ensure everything is properly executed. Delilah took the pen offered by the judge, emotion welling in her throat as she signed her name. For Eleanor, for Catherine, she thought. Justice of a sort at last. Congratulations, Miss Morgan, Judge Wilson said, taking the papers to add his own signature as witness. Your niece is now one of the wealthiest young ladies in Colorado Territory. Thank you, Judge Wilson, Delilah said sincerely. Will I receive copies of the documents? Of course, I'll have them prepared immediately. The judge rang a small bell and a clerk appeared to take the papers. They'll be ready within the hour. As they waited, Delilah felt a curious mixture of triumph and melancholy. She had achieved what she came for. Catherine's future was secure, her birthright acknowledged. Yet the victory felt hollow when she thought of returning to Boston, leaving behind the mountains, the wild beauty of this place, leaving Logan. As if reading her thoughts, he took her hand, his touch warm and reassuring. "It's not over yet," he said softly. "We still have decisions to make." The clerk returned with the copies, neatly bound with ribbon and bearing the judge's seal. As they left the office, Delilah clutched the documents to her chest, tangible proof of her success. "We should celebrate," Logan suggested as they stepped into the autumn sunshine. "Dinner at the hotel. Something better than Mrs. Holloway's stew, fine as it is." Delilah smiled, the first genuine smile in days. "I'd like that." They spent the afternoon making arrangements for Delilah's return journey, securing a stagecoach ticket for the following week, sending telegrams to her neighbor in Boston about her impending return with news about Catherine's future. As they walked Silverton streets, Delilah found herself seeing the town with new eyes. It was rugged, yes, unrefined compared to Boston's cultured elegance. But there was life here, opportunity, a sense of possibility that the rigid social structures of the East had never allowed. "Penny for your thoughts," Logan said as they paused to watch the sunset paint the surrounding peaks gold and crimson. "I was thinking about possibilities," Delilah admitted. "About choices." Logan's eyes held hers. "Any particular choices?" "The stage leaves next Tuesday," she said. "I need to return to Boston, to Catherine, but after that." She took a deep breath. "After that, perhaps there are other possibilities." Hope flared in Logan's eyes. "What kind of possibilities are you considering, Miss Morgan?" "The kind that involve mountains," she said softly. "And a certain guide who knows them well." Logan's smile was like the sunrise. "These mountains have a way of getting into your blood," he said, "making you belong to them." "Perhaps it's not just the mountains," Delilah replied, her heart in her eyes. He took her hand, bringing it to his lips in a gesture that was both courtly and intensely intimate. "We have time to figure it out," he said. "I'm not going anywhere." The Silver Crown Hotel's dining room was the finest establishment in Silverton, with actual tablecloths and a waiter in a somewhat shabby but clean jacket. Logan had reserved a table by the window, with a view of the mountains now silhouetted against the darkening sky. Delilah wore her green dress, the one she had arrived in, now carefully laundered and pressed by Mrs. Holloway. Logan had somehow acquired a proper coat and tie, though he looked slightly uncomfortable in the formal attire. "You clean up nicely, Mr. Reed," Delilah teased as they were seated. "Don't get used to it," he replied with a wry smile. "Normal service resumes tomorrow." They ordered the hotel's finest offerings: beefsteak, potatoes, fresh bread, and a bottle of California wine that the waiter presented with exaggerated ceremony. As they ate, they talked of the future of Catherine, of Boston, of Silverton and its possibilities. Logan spoke of his work guiding expeditions, of the mining claims he still held, of the cabin he was building in a valley north of town. "It's not much yet," he admitted. "2 rooms, a decent fireplace, but the land around it is good, room for a proper garden, maybe some livestock eventually." "It sounds wonderful," Delilah said sincerely. "It's a start," Logan replied, his eyes holding hers. "Could be more with time, with the right partner." The word hung between them, full of promise. Delilah's heart swelled with emotions she had never expected to find in this wild place: love, hope, a sense of belonging that had nothing to do with geography and everything to do with the man sitting across from her. After dinner, they walked slowly back toward Mrs. Holloway's boarding house, reluctant for the evening to end. The night was clear, stars blazing overhead in a display that still took Delilah's breath away after weeks in the mountains. They paused in the small garden behind the boarding house, the scent of Mrs. Holloway's late roses sweet in the cool air. "I have something for you," Logan said suddenly, reaching into his pocket. "Been carrying it for days, waiting for the right moment." He withdrew a small pouch and placed it in her palm. "Open it," he urged when she hesitated. Inside was a ring, not diamond or gold, but a band of silver set with a small, deep blue stone that caught the starlight. "Logan," she breathed, looking up at him in wonder. It's sapphire, he explained. Found it myself in a creek up north. Had the silversmith in Durango set it while we were there. He took her hand. I know it's not diamonds or fine gold like you might have had in Boston. I don't want diamonds, Delilah interrupted, her heart so full she could hardly speak. Logan's smile was tender as he completed the thought. Then I'll give you forever instead. He dropped to one knee before her. Marry me, Delilah Morgan. Come back to me after you've settled Catherine. Make a life with me here. Tears blurred Delilah's vision. Yes, she whispered, then louder. Yes, Logan Reed, I will marry you. He slipped the ring onto her finger, then stood and gathered her into his arms. His kiss was a promise, a beginning, a future neither had imagined when they first met outside Blackwood's office just weeks ago. When they finally parted, Logan rested his forehead against hers. I love you, Delilah Morgan. Have since you stood up to Blackwood that first day all Boston pride and courage. And I love you, she replied, the words feeling right, natural, inevitable. Enough to leave everything I've known for a life I never imagined. Not leaving, Logan corrected gently. Finding where you truly belong, in his arms under the vast canopy of stars. Delilah knew he was right. She had come west seeking justice for her sister and security for her niece. She had found that and more, a love that defied expectation, a future bright with promise, and a place in these wild mountains that felt, against all logic, like home. The week before Delilah's departure passed in a bittersweet haze. By day, they made plans Logan would escort her to Denver, see her safely onto the eastbound train. Delilah would settle her affairs in Boston, collect Catherine, and return west by spring when the mountain passes were clear again. By night, they sat close in Mrs. Holloway's parlor, speaking of the future, of the life they would build together. The boarding house proprietress watched their courtship with knowing eyes and a pleased smile, having given her blessing when they announced their engagement. About time Logan found someone who could match his stubborn streak, she had declared, examining Delilah's ring with approval. And you, Miss Morgan, you've got the steel in your spine that surviving out here requires. On their last evening together, Logan took Delilah riding into the mountains north of town, to a high meadow with a view that stretched for miles. This is it, he said as they dismounted. My land, the cabin's just down there by that stand of pines. Delilah turned slowly, taking in the sweep of the valley below, the distant peaks still capped with snow despite the late summer heat. It was wild, beautiful, utterly different from the orderly streets and cultivated gardens of Boston. It's perfect, she said, meaning it. I can see why you love it here. Logan came to stand beside her, his arm slipping around her waist. Wasn't sure I did after Jacob died, thought about leaving, heading further west maybe. He looked down at her, his eyes reflecting the vast blue sky. Glad I stayed. So am I, Delilah leaned into him, content in a way she had never known before. They stood together as the sun began its descent, painting the valley in gold and amber. In that moment, Delilah could see their future stretching before them, a cabin expanded into a home, children running in the meadow, years unfolding in this wild, beautiful place. I'll miss you, Logan said softly. These 6 months will be the longest of my life. For me as well, Delilah replied, but we'll write, and spring will come before we know it. Bringing you and Catherine back to me, he finished, his voice rich with certainty. The stage was scheduled to depart at noon the following day. Delilah's trunk was packed, her affairs in Silverton settled. The precious legal documents acknowledging Catherine's heritage were secured in a special pocket inside her traveling coat. Mrs. Holloway prepared a hearty breakfast, fussing over Delilah like a mother sending a daughter off to school. You'll need your strength for the journey, she insisted, piling Delilah's plate with eggs and bacon. And take this bread for the road. Stage food isn't fit for pigs, let alone a lady. As the hour of departure approached, a curious peace settled over Delilah. 6 weeks ago, she had arrived in Silverton a stranger, driven by grief and determination. She would leave as a woman engaged with a future here in these mountains, a life to return to. Logan drove her to the stage station in a borrowed buggy, her trunk secured in the back. The main street was busy, miners and townspeople going about their business, paying little attention to the eastbound stage preparing for departure. As they approached the station, Delilah's eyes were drawn to a familiar figure standing near the stage. Lucas Blackwood, impeccably dressed as always, watching their arrival with an unreadable expression. "What's he doing here?" She whispered to Logan, tension immediately replacing her earlier piece. "Making sure you're leaving, most likely," Logan replied, his voice hard. "Don't worry, he can't hurt you now." They pulled up to the station, and Logan jumped down to help Delilah alight. As he handed her down, Blackwood approached, removing his hat with exaggerated courtesy. "Miss Morgan," he greeted her, "I thought I should see you off personally, ensure your journey begins safely." The implied threat beneath the polite words was clear. Logan moved subtly closer to Delilah, his body tense. "How thoughtful, Mr. Blackwood," Delilah replied coolly. "Though unnecessary, Mr. Reed is seeing to my comfort." Blackwood's gaze flicked to Logan, then back to Delilah. "Yes, I've noticed your friendship with Mr. Reed has flourished during your stay in Silverton." His eyes dropped to the ring on her finger. "Quite flourished, it seems. Is there something specific you wanted, Blackwood?" Logan asked, his patience clearly wearing thin. "Merely to wish Miss Morgan a safe journey," Blackwood replied. "And to remind her of our arrangement. The documents we signed remain valid only as long as certain other documents remain secure." "The agreements stand," Delilah said firmly. "Catherine will receive her birthright and your secret remains safe." Blackwood nodded, apparently satisfied. "Then I wish you Godspeed, Miss Morgan. I trust we will not meet again." "For Catherine's sake, I hope not," Delilah replied. With a final nod, Blackwood replaced his hat and walked away, the tension dissipating with his departure. "Charming to the last," Logan muttered, guiding Delilah toward the stage. "I'll be glad when you're beyond his reach." "For a few months only," she reminded him. "I'm coming back, remember?" The stage driver was calling for passengers to board. Logan helped the driver secure Delilah's trunk, then turned to her, taking both her hands in his. 6 months, he said, his eyes memorizing her face. "I'll be in Denver waiting when your train arrives in April." "With the spring thaw," Delilah agreed, fighting tears. "And Catherine." "You'll love her, Logan. She has Eleanor's eyes and the sweetest laugh." "I already love her," he said simply, "because she's part of you." The driver called a final boarding. Logan pulled Delilah close, his kiss fierce and tender all at once. "I love you, Delilah Morgan," he whispered against her lips. "Come back to me." "I will," she promised. "This isn't goodbye, it's just until spring." With a final embrace, Delilah boarded the stage, settling into the seat by the window. As the driver called to the horses and the stage lurched into motion, she kept her eyes on Logan, standing tall and straight in the dusty street, until the turn in the road took him from view. The journey east was long and arduous, 4 days by stage to Denver, then nearly a week by train across the vast expanse of America. Delilah spent the hours writing in her journal, planning for her return, and composing the first of many letters to Logan. Boston welcomed her with familiar sights and sounds that now seemed strangely foreign. The ordered streets, the brick townhouses, the clip of carriage horses on cobblestone, all of it a world away from the rugged beauty of Silverton. Her neighbor, Mrs. Bennet, greeted her with relief and curiosity. "We've been so worried, my dear," she fussed, ushering Delilah into the parlor where Catherine was napping in a cradle. "Your telegrams were so cryptic. Did you really find the child's father?" "I did," Delilah confirmed, moving immediately to the cradle to see her niece. "And secured her future, as I hoped." Catherine had grown in the weeks of her absence, her cheeks rounder, her dark hair thicker. When she woke and looked up at Delilah with Eleanor's clear blue eyes, the last piece of Delilah's heart settled into place. "Hello, little one," she whispered, gathering the baby into her arms. "I've been on quite an adventure for you." Over the following weeks, Delilah settled back into a semblance of her old life. She reclaimed her apartment, hired a nurse to help with Catherine during the day, and even resumed teaching at the school, though she had made it clear to the headmistress that her position was temporary. "I'll be leaving again in the spring," she explained. "I'm to be married." The announcement caused a stir among her colleagues and the few friends she had maintained after Eleanor's death. A hasty engagement to a Western frontiersman was scandalous enough to provoke raised eyebrows and whispered speculation. Delilah found she cared little for their opinions. Her world had expanded beyond the narrow confines of Boston society. She had faced down a dangerous man, traversed mountain wilderness, and found a love she hadn't known was possible. The disapproval of Boston matrons seemed trivial by comparison. Letters from Logan arrived regularly, carried across the continent by the marvel of the transcontinental railroad. His handwriting was surprisingly elegant for a man more accustomed to rifles than pens, his words painting vivid pictures of life in Silverton, of progress on the cabin, of his longing for her return. "The aspen are turning gold on the mountainsides," he wrote in October. "Reminds me of your hair in the sunset that last evening together. The cabin has a proper roof now and glass in the windows. Mrs. Holloway has taken it upon herself to advise on womanly comforts, whatever that means. I suspect curtains are involved. In November. First snow fell yesterday. The mountains wear it like a bride's veil. Speaking of brides, Reverend Taylor asks weekly when you're returning. I think he's more eager for the wedding than I am. That's a lie. No one is more eager than I am. December brought. Silverton is quiet under its blanket of snow. The mines still operate, but the town sleeps early. I've begun sketching plans for a nursery addition to the cabin. For Catherine at first, then perhaps someday for children of our own. Is that too presumptuous? Strike that question if so. I find myself imagining a future I never dared hope for before you. Delilah's replies were equally heartfelt, sharing details of Catherine's growth, of Boston's changing seasons, of her preparations for their journey west in the spring. Catherine has begun to crawl, she wrote in January. Nothing in the apartment is safe from her curious hands. She has your determination, Logan. Once she sets her mind to something, wild horses couldn't dissuade her. I've told her stories of the mountains, of the home waiting for her. I swear she understands, for she always smiles. As winter settled over Boston, bringing bitter cold and early darkness, Delilah found herself longing for the clarity of mountain air, for the vast openness of the western sky. Boston felt confining now, its social strictures and careful proprieties, a cage she had never fully recognized until she had tasted freedom. February arrived with heavy snow and the final preparations for their departure. Delilah sold most of her furniture, keeping only a few treasured pieces to ship west. Her books, Eleanor's silver, the family portraits, these would make the journey to create a bridge between her old life and the new one waiting in Colorado. Catherine thrived despite the upheaval, growing into a happy, curious baby with Eleanor's smile and what Delilah recognized as Blackwood's determined chin. Looking at her niece, Delilah could see both her heritage and her future, a blend of East and West, of past and possibility. March brought the first hints of spring to Boston, crocuses pushing through the melting snow, days lengthening toward equinox. Delilah's departure was set for the first week of April, when the mountain passes would be clear enough for the final leg from Denver to Silverton. Her last letter to Logan vibrated with anticipation. 3 weeks, my love, 3 weeks until we board the westbound train. Catherine seems to sense the adventure ahead. She watches me pack with solemn eyes, then laughs as if sharing a wonderful secret. Perhaps she is. The secret of coming home, though she's never seen the mountains. I dream of them nightly, the peaks against the sky, the clarity of that mountain light. Most of all, I dream of you waiting. The day of departure dawned clear and mild, Boston putting on its best spring face as if to tempt Delilah to stay. She felt nothing but eagerness as she supervised the loading of their trunks onto the carriage that would take them to the station. Mrs. Bennet came to see them off, dabbing at her eyes with a lace handkerchief. I still don't understand why you must go so far, my dear, she lamented. Boston has everything a young woman and child could need. Not everything, Delilah replied, thinking of Logan, of mountains, of the life waiting for them. But I appreciate your concern, Mrs. Bennet, and all your help with Catherine. The The train journey west was a reverse of her eastward travel, the ordered farmland of New England giving way to the vast plains of the Midwest. Then the first glimpse of mountains on the horizon, growing taller and more majestic with each passing mile. Catherine proved to be an excellent traveler, charming their fellow passengers with her sunny disposition and curious blue eyes. More than one matron commented on the baby's beauty, on her resemblance to Delilah, an assumption Delilah did not correct, on the adventure of traveling west with such a young child. "My fiancé is waiting in Denver," Delilah explained when asked. "We're starting a new life in Silverton." The responses ranged from approval to barely concealed horror at the thought of raising a child in such uncivilized surroundings. Delilah merely smiled, secure in the rightness of her decision. As the train chugged into Denver's station 7 days after leaving Boston, Delilah's heart pounded with anticipation. She gathered Catherine into her arms, straightened her travel-wrinkled skirts, and moved toward the exit. The platform was crowded with travelers, porters, and those waiting to meet the eastbound train. For a moment, Delilah feared Logan had been delayed, that she would need to find accommodations in Denver until he arrived. Then the crowd parted, and there he was, taller than she remembered, his face more bronzed from the mountain sun, his eyes searching the disembarking passengers with an intensity that made her breath catch. When he saw her, his whole face transformed, joy lighting his features like sunrise over the mountains. In 3 long strides he was before her, his hands gently cradling her face as if she might be a dream that would dissolve at his touch. "You're here," he breathed. "You came back." "I promised," Delilah replied simply, her own joy too vast for more elaborate words. Logan's gaze dropped to Catherine, nestled in Delilah's arms. The baby regarded this stranger solemnly for a moment, then broke into a gummy smile that revealed her 2 bottom teeth. "Hello, Catherine," Logan said softly. "I'm very pleased to finally meet you." To Delilah's delight, Catherine immediately reached for him, tiny hands grabbing at his shirt front. With natural ease, Logan took the baby into his arms, his large hands gentle and sure. "She knows you already," Delilah said, watching the 2 most important people in her life becoming acquainted. "I've told her so much about you." "All good things, I hope," Logan replied, his eyes never leaving Catherine's face. "The very best," Delilah assured him. They spent 2 days in Denver, resting from the long journey and purchasing supplies for the final leg to Silverton. Logan had arranged for a sturdy wagon rather than the stagecoach, allowing for a more comfortable journey with Catherine. "The spring thaw has cleared the passes," he told Delilah as they prepared to leave. "And I've timed our travel to avoid the worst of the mud season. Should be a pleasant journey." The trip from Denver to Silverton took 4 days, following the same route Delilah had traveled east months before. The mountains welcomed her back with spectacular vistas, the air growing clearer and sweeter as they climbed higher into the Rockies. Catherine was entranced by her surroundings, her blue eyes wide as she took in the towering peaks, the rushing streams, the forests of pine and aspen beginning to leaf out in the spring sunshine. On the final day, as they approached Silverton, Logan directed the wagon onto a less traveled road that wound north of town. "Where are we going?" Delilah asked, though she suspected the answer. Logan's smile was both shy and proud. "Home," he said simply, "if that's all right with you." "Thought you might like to see the cabin first, before facing the whole town." The road climbed gently through pine forest, eventually opening onto the meadow Logan had shown her the previous summer. In the clear spring light, it was even more beautiful wildflowers beginning to dot the grass. The surrounding peaks still snow-capped against the azure sky, and there, nestled at the edge of the pines, stood the cabin. It was larger than Delilah had expected, with a covered porch spanning the front, windows gleaming in the afternoon sun, smoke curling from a stone chimney. "Logan," she breathed. "It's beautiful." His eyes searched her face. "You really think so? It's not what you're used to, I know." "It's perfect," Delilah said, meaning it with her whole heart. "It's home." The interior revealed Logan's careful planning and Mrs. Holloway's womanly comforts, curtains at the windows, braided rugs on the plank floors, a kitchen with an actual cookstove rather than just a fireplace. A door led to a second room furnished with a cradle and small dresser. "For Catherine," Logan explained, suddenly uncertain. "Is it all right?" Tears blurred Delilah's vision. "It's more than all right," she managed. "It's everything I could have hoped for." That evening, as Catherine slept peacefully in her new cradle, Delilah and Logan sat on the cabin's porch, watching the alpenglow paint the surrounding peaks rose and gold. His arm was around her shoulders, her head resting against him, their bodies fitting together as if designed for exactly this closeness. "Happy?" Logan asked softly. Delilah nodded against his shoulder. "Completely, are you?" "More than I knew was possible." He turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. "Delilah Morgan, will you marry me? Again, I mean, now that you've seen what you're getting into," she laughed, joy bubbling up like a mountain spring. "Yes, Logan Reed, again and always, yes." They were married 2 weeks later in Silverton's small Presbyterian church, with Mrs. Holloway holding Catherine and what seemed like half the town in attendance. Delilah wore a simple dress of ivory silk, ordered from Denver, with Eleanor's lace veil and wildflowers in her hair. Logan, resplendent and slightly uncomfortable in a new suit, watched her walk down the aisle with wonder in his eyes, as if he couldn't quite believe his good fortune. The vows were traditional, but the meaning behind them was anything but conventional. A Boston schoolteacher and a mountain guide, brought together by tragedy but bound now by choice, by love, by a future neither could have imagined when they first met. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," Reverend Taylor declared. "What God has joined together, let no man put asunder." The kiss that followed was a promise, a beginning, a commitment to the life they would build together in these mountains that had brought them to each other. The reception was held at the Silver Crown Hotel, where they had shared their first meal together nearly a year before. The town turned out in force to celebrate miners, shopkeepers, Mrs. Holloway beaming with pride as if she had personally arranged the match. As the celebration continued around them, Logan led Delilah onto the small dance floor, pulling her close for a waltz. "Mrs. Reed," he murmured against her hair, "has a nice ring to it." "It does indeed, Mr. Reed," Delilah agreed, smiling up at him, "though I must warn you, I'm a terrible dancer." "Then we'll make up our own steps," Logan replied, guiding her in a pattern that bore little resemblance to a proper waltz but felt perfectly right for them. "We've never been much for following conventions anyway." Later, as they prepared to leave, Catherine sleeping peacefully in Mrs. Holloway's arms, the older woman had insisted on keeping the baby for their wedding night. Delilah caught sight of a familiar figure watching from the hotel entrance, Lucas Blackwood, his expression unreadable. Their eyes met across the room, and after a moment, Blackwood inclined his head slightly, not quite a blessing, but an acknowledgement, perhaps even a grudging respect. Delilah returned the nod, then turned away. Blackwood was Catherine's father by blood, but he would never be family. That role belonged to Logan now, who had loved the child from the moment he first held her. They rode home under a canopy of stars, the spring night mild and fragrant with pine. The cabin welcomed them with warmth and solitude, a sanctuary for their first night as husband and wife. Later, as they lay entwined in the darkness, Logan traced the curve of Delilah's cheek with gentle fingers. "I meant what I said, you know," he murmured, "about forever." Delilah turned to kiss his palm. "I know, and I intend to hold you to it, Logan Reed." "Wouldn't have it any other way, Delilah Reed," he replied, gathering her close. Outside, the mountains stood sentinel under the starlit sky, ancient and enduring like the love that had brought a Boston schoolteacher west in search of justice, and given her instead a future beyond anything she could have imagined. 5 years later, the cabin had expanded into a proper home, 2 additional rooms, a larger kitchen, a covered porch that wrapped around 3 sides. The meadow boasted a vegetable garden, a small orchard of apple trees, and a corral where 2 horses and a milk cow grazed contentedly. On a summer afternoon, Delilah sat on the porch, mending a small shirt while keeping one eye on the children playing in the meadow. Catherine, now 6, her dark hair in 2 long braids, was instructing her 3-year-old brother Jacob in the finer points of catching grasshoppers. "Gently, Jake," she called, her voice carrying clearly in the mountain air. "You'll squish him if you grab too hard." Delilah smiled, watching her son's chubby fingers open to reveal the insect, his delight at the successful capture written across his face. Catherine's patience with her younger brother never ceased to amaze Delilah. The little girl had taken to her role as big sister with natural authority and tenderness. The sound of hoofbeats drew her attention to the path leading from town. Logan appeared around the bend, returning from his weekly trip to Silverton for supplies and mail. Catherine spotted him immediately. "Papa's home," she cried, abandoning the grasshopper lesson to race toward the approaching rider, Jacob toddling after her as fast as his little legs could carry him. Logan dismounted in one fluid motion, scooping both children up in his arms as they reached him. His laughter mingled with theirs, carrying across the meadow to where Delilah sat, her heart full to bursting at the sight. "And how are my best girl and boy?" he asked, setting them down and leading his horse toward the cabin, a child clinging to each hand. "I caught 3 grasshoppers and a butterfly," Jacob announced proudly, "and I didn't squish any of them." "Very impressive," Logan commended him seriously. "You've got your mother's gentle touch." "And I've been teaching him," Catherine added, not to be outdone, "like you taught me last summer." "You're a fine teacher, Cat," Logan assured her, using the nickname that had evolved naturally during her toddler years. Reaching the porch, he bent to kiss Delilah, a gesture that still sent warmth spreading through her even after 5 years of marriage. "Hello, wife," he murmured against her lips. "Hello, husband," she replied, smiling up at him. "Successful trip." "Very." Logan reached into his saddlebag and withdrew a bundle of letters. Mail from Boston, and he pulled out a small package wrapped in brown paper, something special for someone who's been very patient with her little brother. Catherine's eyes widened as he handed her the package. "For me, really." "You've earned it," Logan assured her. "Go ahead, open it." With careful fingers, Catherine unwrapped the package to reveal a small book, A Child's Garden of Verses by Robert Louis Stevenson. "My very own book," she breathed, handling it with reverence. "Your mother mentioned you'd been admiring it in the catalog," Logan explained. "Thought a young lady who's learning to read should have her own special book." Catherine threw her arms around his waist. "Thank you, Papa, it's the best present ever." The word Papa still brought a softening to Logan's expression, even after years of hearing it. When Catherine had first called him that, shortly after her 2nd birthday, he had lifted her high in the air, his joy too great for words. Later, after the children were settled with their evening milk, and Cookie's Catherine already poring over her new book, Jacob contentedly building with wooden blocks, Logan and Delilah sat together on the porch, watching the sunset paint the mountains in magnificent hues. "Letter from Judge Wilson," Logan said, handing her one of the envelopes from Boston. "About Catherine's trust." Delilah opened it, scanning the formal legal language. "The annual report," she confirmed. "The trust continues to grow. She'll be quite the heiress when she comes of age." "Does that ever worry you?" Logan asked quietly. "That she might want a different life than this when she's older? Boston, finishing school's society." "Sometimes," Delilah admitted. "But then I see how she loves these mountains, how naturally she takes to this life." She smiled. "Besides, she's too much your daughter to be satisfied with parlor tea parties and dancing lessons." "Not by blood," Logan reminded her, though the distinction had long since ceased to matter to either of them. "In every way that counts," Delilah said firmly. "Blood is the least of what makes a family." Logan's arm tightened around her shoulders. "Have I told you today how much I love you, Delilah Reed? You might have mentioned it," she teased, "but I never tire of hearing it." "Good." He turned to face her fully. "Because I plan to tell you every day for at least the next 50 years. "Only 50? Delilah raised an eyebrow in mock offense. Logan laughed, the sound warm and free. "Forever then," he amended, "just as I promised that first night." "Forever," Delilah agreed, leaning into his embrace as the last light of day gilded the mountains that had become her home. Inside the cabin, Catherine read her new book by lamplight. Jacob built a tower that reached nearly to his chin, and the heart of the family Logan and Delilah had created beat strong and sure. Not diamonds, but something far more precious, a love as enduring as the mountains themselves, a forever made new with each passing day.